Welcome to part 2 of self-hosting launch from scratch. So I sort of ended the last video with the creation of an SFTP server and building a launch library and seeing it get placed into that server. I was connecting with an FTP client and just making sure that it was all there. And I said in this video, I was going to show how to do all this self-hosting stuff. Well, I ended up doing all that and recording it, but it doesn't make for a very good video because it's mostly just me clicking around in AWS and making assumptions about what things mean and saying only for test purposes and et cetera, et cetera. So rather than watch me do that and fumble around and wait for things to be provisioned and whatnot, I thought I'd go through each one of those steps and then I'll show you each one of those steps, but I won't actually do the whole process. I'll just describe what I did. Okay, so let's get on with that. So, like I said, all my launch minified library ends up in this SFTP server, which is an EC2 instance running in AWS, right? Launch connects to it, dumps all the files there, and that's it. And I'm left to decide what to do with them. So I know that I want to host the file from S3 with CloudFront, with Amazon's CDN service, and use my own domain name to do that. So the first thing I need to do is get the file from the FTP server into an S3 bucket. So I have a way that's sort of working now. You know, if this was in like a real quote unquote production setting, I would probably do something different. Or I would fine tune this a little bit. But basically, I have this cron job that I've set up on my EC2 instance. So I'm inside my EC2 instance here. And I have this file called folder watch. Move this so it's not hidden. Not R, I'm going to list them. So I have this file called folder watch, which is just, it's a cron tab that's running every minute right now, or it's a cron job that's running every minute, and it's just moving the uploaded files to S3. So obviously we don't want this to run every minute, but if this EC2 container is only going to be running for like a very short amount of time, like I'm going to turn it on to publish and then turn it off when I don't need to publish, right? Because I don't need this running 24/7 if I'm only going to publish, I don't know, a couple times a day at most. So all this is sort of factored on the EC2 instance being on, and while it's on, every minute it's transferring folders from or it's transferring files from EC2 to S3. So let's just see that in action really quick. So let's see, my last publish was at 7:11. It's now like 7:20-ish. And if I just do new library, I don't think there's anything changing there. Okay, so that's built. So I'm gonna publish that. Bring up CyberDuck, and we're going to see this minified file change to 720, and then I'll go look in S3 and it should also say 720. Okay, so there's my new file, 720, and if I go look in my S3 bucket, probably hasn't run yet. Oh no, there we go. So yeah, my minified file, 720. Don't worry about these other things. I was just messing around with some other stuff. So this minified file was actually moved from the EC2 instance to S3. So it was just transferred. So I'm going to leave the EC2 instance running for now, but you know, if this was a real life scenario, I wouldn't need this anymore because it's archiving and forwarding to S3 is done, and I can turn it off until I need to publish again, but I know I'm going to publish in a second again soon. So, okay, so that's moving from SFTP to S3. So in order to host from S3, in order to say, hey, make this file reachable anywhere, and use my own domain, I have to do a couple things. So the first thing I need to do is verify my domain between Amazon and my DNS. So my DNS is Squarespace, so you can come into Amazon Certificate Manager and hit request, and you're going to request a new public certificate, and it's going to ask for your domain name. I actually put cdn.perpetua.digital.com so I can host. It's just easier for me on Squarespace to do stuff in subdomains, but your setup might be different. So you just add your fully formed domain name that you're going to use here and hit request certificate, and then Amazon will spit you out some CNAME stuff to do, and then you'll be good to go. So here's my domain, and then here's my CNAME stuff, and I put that into Squarespace, but I'm not going to show me copying and pasting stuff. Okay, so that's the certificate. That is important because when you go to create a distribution, you're going to go to distributions, create distributions, and it's going to ask you, where do you want to host from? And obviously I want to host from an S3 bucket. So if I go and say I want to host from my Perpetua Digital bucket, that is this guy right here, and I have this folder named production. So it's going to ask me my origin path, and I'm going to say production. I think it might put a path, so it puts the path name in there. So this distribution is going to make any files that are present in this production folder accessible at this URL. You can set your caching and access settings as desired. I'm just leaving all this as is for now. I'm going to come back to caching in a little bit. Yeah, okay, this is what I was looking for. So 2 things you need to do here. So after you request a certificate and it gets verified, it's going to show up in this little drop down. So if I knew I was going to host another thing on cdn.perpetua.digital, I would select the certificate, and I would say in my alternate domain name is going to be cdn.perpetua.digital, or whatever your domain name is here, right? So I would delete that, or I would add that, but I'm not going to save this now. So I believe everything else I left as is. Yeah, so certificate, domain name, caching settings. So, oh, one more thing. CloudFront isn't enabled by default on all accounts, so you might have to contact Amazon support to request access. I had to do it, and it took a week, and then they turned it on for me. Be very careful because you can accidentally spend money with all these things. Okay, so once you save that, it's going to go into this status, and it's going to say provisioning for a little while. I don't remember how long it takes in the beginning, but eventually you're going to get this ID here, and all this stuff should be green because I'm already using a verified certificate and all that. And this is going to be my distribution name. I'm actually, yeah, this is going to be my distribution name. So this domain here is what I'm going to go into my DNS and say, and make a CNAME record for and say, instead of this domain, serve from cdn.perpetua.digital. So I actually already did that, but for an experiment, I'm not sure if this still works. Okay, it does. So that domain still works, right? So this is my CloudFront server, but this also works. So cdn.perpetua.digital. So this is my self-hosted, on my own domain, first-party launch library. So I actually already put it up in my blog URL. So I added this to the DNS, and I have this log here that says, hello for my self-hosted launch instance. It's this page view rule that just does this console log with blue text and a yellow background. And if I look for satellites, right, everything works the same. It's launch, except now it's not going to be blocked by ad blockers that say block assets.adobedtm.com or whatever, and everything comes from CDN. So I can see right here, cdn.perpetua.digital returns my launch library. So you can see that right here. Okay, so that's everything up and working. Let's take a break and we'll come back and talk through the actual publishing process, because there's some fine tweaking you have to do when you're doing self-hosting like this. So just because I published that change, it doesn't mean that the cache on my CloudFront distribution, so like the version of my launch library that I'm hosting in S3, just because I've moved that file to the FTP bucket, or moved that file to the FTP server, this FTP server moved to the S3, that doesn't mean that CloudFront is automatically hosting the newest version. So this is where the trade-offs of self-hosting come in. So usually when your launch library is hosted by Akamai, you publish a production, you make a change, you refresh, and everything, the change is there instantly, right? It's up and running. Whatever you did, you have the newest version. When you self-host, you get to manage that. So in CloudFront settings, in both CloudFront settings and in S3 is where you can change that stuff. So in your S3 bucket, when you look at your file, you can come down here, and this is grayed out because I have to do it in a different way. But you can specify cache control settings here. So you can say, I think the default is, some sort of weird optimization where it tries to do it for you, but I want to say that's like an hour, something like that. But you can come and say, change it every 5 minutes or something like that. If you're publishing a bunch, that's sort of up to you. You can do it manually also through invalidations. So I can actually come up in here and say, actually, I'm not going to do this yet. If I look at this library, it's still the old version, right? So I published that new message with the green background, but my self-hosted launch is through CloudFront is still showing the old one. That's because that version is cached, and I need to tell it, hey, I have a new one. So I can force this with this method called an invalidation, which will work for this demonstration purposes. But what I would actually do is probably build that into the build process somehow. So I might go into, when make a callback or something that says when production is published, make a call to AWS and say invalidate all caches, right? Or invalidate this cache, because I'm 99% sure you can do this via the command line. If you can do it via the command line, you can do it in code. And if you do it in code, you can make it a launch callback. So that's what I would probably do. But just for demonstration purposes, this is what is actually happening. I'm telling AWS that, hey, I got a new version. Stop serving the old one and serve my new version instead. So that usually happens pretty quick. It's going to say in progress for a little while. And it just completed. So drum roll, please. Refresh. Hey, we got a new message now. We're now serving our brand new self-hosted launch instance. So that's beginning to end the pipeline of hosting self-launch. Obviously, in a production environment, I would do things I would tweak a little more of my controls and, really nail it in of like when this instance should be running and when caches should be invalidated. All the things that Launch does for you when you host with them, you have the opportunity to do for yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm done publishing, right, is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn this instance off because I do not need it. So what this means, because that instance isn't running, is that FTP is not going to work. File transfer from FTP to S3 is not going to work. I can invalidate cache, but nothing's going to happen because the file in the S3 bucket will always be the same. So that actually looks like this. So this doesn't work. So when I come and build in here, and I go to publish to production, this URL is going to be down because the instance isn't running. So when I come in here, come on. This should build in like 2 seconds. There's nothing in here. Okay, so when I say publish to production, this is going to turn red. It should turn red almost instantly, because although the library, will build successfully, it can't do its final step, which is sending it to the SFTP server. So I said it was going to build quick, and it didn't. Let's see. Actually, you know what? This will take a second because I think it has to time out. Okay, yeah, there we go. So I don't want to look at that. I'm going to look at the actual message. There we go. So this failed because the connection timed out. And it timed out because the instance isn't running, which means I can't publish now. In order to publish, come back in here, turn this on. This is stopped. If I wanted to publish it, come back in here and turn this on. Publishing would work again. So how I would automate this is, I would do it in launch callbacks for sure. But I think what I would do is, do my local development, testing, whatever. Then I would either make a special environment called turn on instance or something like that. Build that, which would trigger, and build a callback to trigger this thing to on. Then, wait a couple minutes, and then I'd be able to publish. And then I would probably do some callback over here that says, when production is published, turn the instance off. So that's going to save me money because the instance is running all the time. And I don't know, if the instance isn't running, people can't hack into it, whatever. But yeah, so that, if you look on Perpetua.digital, like the website, you can see that I'm self-hosting Launch. And let's see what this looks like in the debugger. I don't even know if this will show up in here. So let's refresh this. Yeah, that's interesting. Because, oh no, okay. It is there. Interesting. This must look at satellite, but you can see here, you can see right here that in the debugger, my launch URL is listed as, this CDN location. So end-to-end self-hosting of Launch.